Hello and welcome to the D&D 420 podcast. This is a show dedicated to helping you become a better dungeon master. I'm your host, Eric M. Hunter, and I am a struggling game master trying to figure out how to tell a better story. Joining me shortly is Jimmy Shields. He is the creator of D&D 420 and an avid D&D fan with over 30 years of experience. In this episode, we dive back into my world, go into every single region, describing what the nuances of those regions, and figuring out when is a good time to start playing this game.
So the homework was really diving into all the regions of the map that I created, and giving them some sort of description, purpose, flora, fauna, that kind of thing. And I went through every region, which there was not a whole lot of regions. There's maybe like, 8 or 10? I could probably count them. And I, what I had mentioned about in the last episode, which was kind of falling for that Star Wars-esque, oh, this is an ice planet, and this is a desert planet, and this is a forest planet, like that one topographical oddity of every region, so wildly different. And then I remembered that people exist in this world, and that sometimes what can make this region interesting is the people. So some of them I felt like I did a fairly interesting idea, especially as on a first get. So for instance, in the like the northern eastern area, it's kind of more of a mountainous area, like high mountains, like Mount Everest mountains. And I was like, oh, okay, there would be another. Why not have another religious sect here? But like they consider themselves like the welcoming party for whenever if or when the architects ever come back. That they're going to come from this side of to meet them, so they want to be the first ones there. And I also described it as the ground is kind of broken up with parts of the machine kind of jutting and shooting out from the ground, like they're broken. Which could, again, I was thinking of, I could explain this as something else. Is like maybe they were trying to build something else here, and it just exploded, and now this is all that's left. Trying to go for that idea that this world's been lived in before, and these people are here now, kind of idea.
Okay, yeah.
And I did the opposite on the opposite side of the world, and let me see. Oh, and Afra. I described Afra as a fairly mountainous area. Afra offers luscious vegetation that provides many flowers that can be used for medicine, supplies, supplements, and things of like hallucinogenics and alcohol. The most interesting is the fact that nothing of the machine is found here, not underground or any surrounding area. The land isn't as mountainous. The land where it's not mountains is extremely flat. There's actually small parts that the sea that fall in a way that would suggest a sort of man-made irrigation system. So again, I was like, oh, this would be a cool, like maybe whoever originally founded this place started here, so clearly they wouldn't destroy where they live. They would build, some sort of a culture that can provide for them, and then if they build the machine after that, they would want to do that away from where they live, and the off chance that something dangerous may have happened, like in the other area on the other side. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So I stuck with what you were saying about like building character into the map, without having to introduce characters, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does.
And then after I got done with all of this and all the areas, I was like, I need to redraw this map. I need to be more delicate with it. I need to take more time to build it. Because now I feel like I've got a pretty good start. I'm building a world that like somebody can take and be like, oh, I don't want to play in D&D. I don't want to play in Sword Coast or whatever. Like I want to play somewhere else, and this is now a unique thing that somebody could role play in.
And you know what? Here's what's cool. It's ready. It's ready. And we've kind of joked around about it a little bit the whole time. Like, is it ready? You got a lot more work to do.
Sure.
Well, I got news for you. You're always going to feel like you have more work to do.
Right.
5 campaigns from now, you're going to feel like you got a lot more work to do. I've been gaming in my game world, the primary one, for 27 years. And I feel like today I still have a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
The world does not have to be finished. You do not have to be complete. It does not need to be Earth. You're never going to get to that point, man.
Sure.
Never. I mean, like we talked about it a couple of weeks ago. Like the Sword Coast, you think that was written by one guy?
Exactly. Right.
I mean,
no, there was a team.
I mean,
it started with one, and then
yes,
it's been
the
1,000 times iterated on.
Of
yeah.
the Sword Coast is one person maybe, or then this or that part was one person, but then all these other things were interjected in, and it's still not complete. Like,
right.
Does it talk about everything that we could think of? No, it does not. It leaves lots of things gray intentionally, and you will do the same thing. Leave lots of parts of your world unexplored or undefined. You can even give names to it, but don't give it definition, or maybe things about it, but don't finish it. Mm-hmm. That way, when somebody wants to, you have an aspiring writer turn in a 4-page backstory about their character that you love, you can be like, hey man, a half a page or up to 2 pages would be great, but you've gone way above and beyond, and here's what I'd like to do. And this isn't like encouraging or a rewarding system, but in a way, like, why don't I take what I love about what you wrote, can we talk about changing it a little bit so it fits in with what I've got over here? And
right.
then tell them about that, and they'll go, oh, that's kind of what I was thinking. Well, what if we change this to that, and then we plug it right in, and now your thing, you wrote it, and when you make decisions about it in character, you don't have to ask me because it's on you. I've reflected back to the player. Like, you want to make your own monastery, and when you turn in your backstory, it's all this really cool shit about this really perfect monastery that would fit right into my game world. I love it. Absolutely. Boom. I don't need law enforcement for this area because his monastery is militant and has 100 monks and has all these things, and now I just plug them in as the law enforcement for this area that I didn't know what I was going to do.
Right. So it's like solving a problem before you kind of knew that you had a problem.
Exactly. Because so many times, and myself included, have I written too much. You don't get to use it all when you write too much.
Right.
For world building, campaign building, anything. You won't get to use it all.
Well, and as somebody who is an aspiring writer like myself, that, like, the outlining, the character backstory 4 pages, like, at the end of the day, what you're doing is you're avoiding the real work, which is writing the story. And I've realized that I'm obviously in the past couple of episodes, I'm having more fun doing this than I did in the beginning, because I think in the beginning I just didn't have a clear idea of what I was doing, which is, the whole idea of this series is to kind of learn as you go. And I've realized now that it's exactly what you said. Like, it's never going to be done. Like, there will always be something else. There's always going to be someone else. There's always going to be a characteristic that wasn't explored initially, and as you play, you may need to do it later. But I'm wasting. I won't say wasting time, but I'm using time that could be better spent playing D&D, which is kind of the whole idea.
Perhaps. Now, the one thing that you can't dodge is you're getting into it now. It's really fun. Like, I can't tell you how many documentaries I've watched in the past 3 weeks trying to get my flora and fauna right for Dragon's Claw. Mm-hmm. I have this really cool looking island and these really cool names for the kingdoms, and a kind of interesting story about how the people interact, how they came here at different times, how they view one another, all these things, how they work together, what the imports, exports are, what kind of monsters I'm going to populate. But the thing I'm having the most trouble with is deciding I've got 100 things, bullet points, maybe, in flora and fauna. I can't use them all. I mean, I can, because if I was going to create a real, true ecosystem, I could, but I don't want to have to do that.
Sure.
I want to put the interesting things in there. These are the types of things that you can find. And I might even have a couple of lines in the overall, like, you can find trout and these type of fish and whatever in all of these waters. And then you get an idea of what type of waters they are. If you as a DM want to know more about what type of fish they are and you're going to storytell in the game world that I've made, you could say, oh, there are trout there. Google what kind of water do trout like? Where can I find trout? What fish coexist with trout? Boom, just do it that way. Or this island, these are the temperatures, he said, and this is the kind of location. It's tropical, but it's not, like, it gets a ton of rain in one season and super dry for another. Like, oh, that, if you know those things, you can easily plug whatever you want to as a DM playing in another game system or gaming world into there. So I don't need to write all that. If I want to do it later on because of the campaign we're going to tell,
sure,
I can put more stuff in there. And if somebody says, oh, is there a fucking such and such tree here? Well, I didn't name every tree species. Does it fit here? Sure, why not? Now I'm going to make a note of it because you made an interesting location about it.
Right.
You know, because you had a question about your character's backstory, or you had a question about something you wanted to do in game because of something you read online or in a book somewhere. Let's make it work. And so, and here's a thing to keep in mind as well, because you are writing a story, a book, as well as a game world. Those are different. Like, when you're writing a world for a book or a story, which I studied a little bit of this in the past when I was younger, in some creative writing classes. The things you want to know about that world are a little more in depth, and they deal with, that's directly related back to one story. We're going to set multiple stories here, stories that we don't know exist. We're going to have people playing in this game that we don't know what characters they're going to be. We don't know if they're going to be good. We don't know if they're going to be evil. We don't know if they're going to be rangers or magic users or what have you. So we need to leave it, a lot of that stuff, wide open. That's why I keep saying you don't have to write a ton, a little paragraph here, a little bit there, leave spaces. You're going to get some super fun players that'll come up with some super fun stuff. But there will need to be some guidelines set. And like, I don't always set these guidelines when I'm making an area, such as like, how high of level of magic do we have here? Is this going to be, is there one person who's 15th level in this city and that's the king? Is his vizier or his advisor or his chief cleric, are they 9th level or are they also 15th level? Then that starts to define how powerful people are. If your king is 20th level and he's surrounded by a whole bunch of 18th level people, that has a massive effect on the game. When you start looking through spells and things and be like, oh, and this actually happened to us in a game where a DM wanted to create kind of a Dark Sun-like setting. Well, for those of you who know, Dark Sun is a 2nd edition setting. It didn't get ported into 3rd edition until much later, and I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe that it was even like a small independent studio that did it. It wasn't even like something that you could go buy in a store.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, I think someone just did it and released it online, like spammed it out there. But I don't know for sure. I've never played in a 3rd edition Dark Sun setting. I've played in Dark Sun in every edition because I always have a desert in my game, and Dark Sun is the catalyst for it. However, and I played the shit out of Dark Sun back in 2nd edition. However, they wanted to do this thing where you could starve, or how do you move an army from one place to another without them starving, and all the food supply and water supply, and they could drink. Like, we're in a desert, it's hard to get water, and you have to carry all this water. But then your cleric gets to be a certain level, and no one cares anymore.
Right.
This is all out the window. You need to look at those spells and decide how often those levels come up in your game. How that's a low-level spell to feed everybody in the group. And if you have an army that you're traveling with, and you just bring a whole bunch of low-level clerics with you as part of your army, who cares? As long as your god's still kicking. Who cares whether they cut off the supply lines? That's not an in-game thing. D&D doesn't want that. So you have to consider, how strong are your casters? Are there a dozen casters in the city that are over 10th level? Because, man, that has an impact on the game. That has an impact on the area. They are automatically people of note. That's the thing. And I remember in 2nd edition, it would define, like, at ninth level, you get a keep. That's what it means to be 9th level. You're strong enough that you're like a lord, that you can own land pretty easily, own a keep pretty easily, all these type of things. Be the leader of a monastery, be the leader of a church. That's around the level it starts. So if there's tons of people like that, and you want to challenge the players with NPCs at very high levels, then Magic's everywhere.
Right.
There are ways to cap that, like with magical laws, such as exist in some of my areas of my gaming world, where it's not legal to cast in the streets. It's like having a gun if you cast a spell. Like, just picture it if you walk into a bar today on Earth, in the city you live in, and you just have a gun. It sets some people on edge.
Sure.
Even if it is legal. Now you pull it out for any reason whatsoever, all of a sudden you got everybody on edge. Everyone will see it. That's kind of like casting a cantrip in my game. You cast that spell, you might as well be shooting a gun. That's, and I liken it back to that. And yeah, magic's everywhere, but man, ain't nobody using it out in the open. It's got to be used under the order of the king for these purposes, or in these areas, or you have to have a license to do it. Therefore, you got to go to classes that say when you can and can't cast. So you can control magic doing something like that. And that's what wizards guilds are for too, or wizards towers, or wizards schools.
Right.
So if there's a bunch of people who cast high level spells, you're going to have those things everywhere. Schools, science type built, sciencey, like magic is like science the way we view it today. So like these buildings just dedicated to studying arcane arts, or governing. So, however you want to do that. But I mean, those are things to think about power level, because are the NPCs as powerful as the king by what level? 10th level, 15th level? Are they ever going to be as powerful as the king? Do you want them to be challenged by other NPCs when they get to be 10th level? Who are those people? Because those become people of note. That's why we create people of note, to challenge NPCs at higher level, or be a checks and balances system. Because your NPC is, the king is 12th level and it maxes out at 9th level for everybody else, and you keep it a low level campaign. By the time those PCs get to 12th level, there is no prison going to hold them.
Right.
They cannot be challenged or kept in check. And then if they leave the area that person's in, they are the gods. So, and I know that's a relatively low level to use as an example, but...
Well, no, but you make a good point, because especially going back to your story about the clerics, like... Why would you have to worry about food and water if you have clerics around? Even for a small fee, you wouldn't have to worry about food or water for the most part. And that would have a huge impact on the world that you're creating, especially if there's a overabundance of, say, a certain type of animal that used to be used as food, and now is just kind of seemed as animal control at that point. So let me ask you this then, like with those sorts of decisions, obviously you want to have an idea, but at the end of the day, is that something that you're going to want to know before campaign time, after campaign time?
You're going to want to know that. Those are going to be campaign based.
Okay.
Now you can set parameters in your head or on paper if you'd like, and I've done that. I've set parameters.
If X happens, then Y is the result.
Yeah, okay, I want this to be the cap. I want most of the kings to be this level, around about this level. The gods are this powerful, the kings are this powerful, lords are this powerful in this area for the most part. And then I go, that in my head, that can change depending on what happens when we talk in game. If I pitch that idea to my group and they're like, oh, So you mean this game's only going to be a short game because you've capped it? Like, we won't be challenged beyond 12th or 15th level, so you're probably going to be done storytelling at that time, but we want to play these characters forever.
Okay.
So then it's like, oh, okay, well, do I want to DM this group in my game world? Because I didn't write it that way. Or can my game world handle that? Can I kind of rethink, or can I have a new area where it's only that high level, and why would it make sense? So again, like we talked about a couple of weeks ago, be ready to change at any time. And whether that be a physical change to your world, or let's just pretend that this is the way it is from now on. I mean, I had to do that when I've changed editions twice now. So that being said, I mean, I had to go through massive imports of new races and monsters. And when we went to 5th edition recently and said that I'm going to play 5th edition in my game world, oh, what a headache, man. What a nightmare. Because it's all based on race. It's all based on what was in the 3.5 rules books.
Right.
So, I mean, I had some things that were already available because of supplement books that I included, like Aasimar and Tiefling, and then they, lo and behold, become part of the core, couple of the core books.
Right.
So that was easy, but everything else, Tabaxi, oh, what a godsend. Thank you. That's what I've been looking for. I created Kitsune in my game, and Kitsune just means fox, and I believe Japanese, but it was believed that foxes could turn into people, right? And
yeah.
So Kitsune, and I've seen like in like anime, I've seen fox people that are really cool looking. Like, man, that could exist in my game. Kitsune, and then Magic the Gathering had it as a type. I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago. It's like, yeah, man, I really like that concept, and I researched what all these ancient beliefs and made it into a 3.5 dude, and it just didn't work very well. And I made it again for 5th edition because they gave us Tabaxi, and it's like, well, that's kind of like what I was trying to do.
Right.
Well, I can make Kitsune more like this now, and like they actually work really well together. And then there's Kenku as well, beautiful stuff. But it was a nightmare to import into my game world and have it make sense at the same time. That's what the Cataclysm's all about.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, Cataclysm changed things. Everything. And it allowed for me to say, yes, I want to insert new races. Why? Because there's these areas where these people came from that weren't there before.
Right.
And that's kind of the mystique to the Cataclysm. It wasn't just a regular old earth-shaking. It wasn't just a regular old storm. The sky fell in one area, and islands appeared out of nowhere in other areas, and huge land masses are in a place before where we never sailed. Maybe it was there, but it doesn't make sense because they have this amazing navy. So that's part of the mystique in my game. Like, how did we get here? It's part of the mystery of it. Well, the gods know. The gods made it happen.
So I feel like, other than like basically what I would consider more grunt work and just to kind of clean things up and to kind of make everything look pretty, like I feel like I should start working on campaigns.
Yes. And the next steps are going to start to tie to campaign building. Like, what I would recommend, and something I do, is I'll make a random list of monsters that can appear in each area. We touched on this last time, but I'll put a D10 list and put 10 monsters that are low level in this area, or maybe a D8. These are levels 1 through 6 maybe. And then levels 7 through 12, another D8's worth of monsters, 8 different things that you could encounter here. Some of them might be still from that basic list, but in higher numbers, if that makes sense. Like Detrith, I put on all 3 lists. You can encounter a small band of small Detrith on list 1, a larger band with bigger Detrith in it in list 2. And in list 3, which is your super high level stuff, 12 and higher in my game, I rarely play past level 17, 18. Because I really feel like anything past level 12 starts to fall apart and become a pain in the ass as a DM, but that's a different story. And then I have another D8's worth of creatures, and that D8 there might be like royalty Detrith or whatever, or, not necessarily royalty, but like
just higher level,
super high, powerful,
yeah,
with other types of creatures involved and what have you. So, make those type of lists, and that'll start to really give each a little more character to each area, as especially if like something appears on the list more than once, or something appears across several lists, across several areas. You start to then define those monsters and their place in your world, like their frequency, how often it's going to come up. And you don't necessarily have to roll on those lists. I sometimes do, but more often than not, I know which. I'll just look at the list and be like, these are the things, and I pick them for the campaign. So I have the lists already made. I do the campaign, and it's going to be, well, the story is about this. And instead of rolling, I just pick them. These make sense for the story. But if I want to do a random encounter later, it's like, oh, well, you guys did something I didn't expect. Okay, therefore we will roll for an encounter.
Right.
And see what comes up. I encourage, when I do campaigns, I encourage having both types of encounters. So having those lists predetermined in large sweeping areas of your world will be extremely useful and very geared toward ready to start writing campaigns.
Tables. Fun.
Yeah, they're the most annoying thing to make and have the biggest impact on the game.
Yeah.
If you use them well. If you don't, I mean, and a lot of people can argue that, and I can hear the arguments coming at me as I say this. But the difference between using those tables and not using them is the difference between winging it and being prepared. You can be prepared and still wing it, but you cannot wing it entirely and have stuff prepared.
With zero
backup.
with
Your
zero
backup's
preparation.
gone. Your backup's gone if you just wing it the whole time. A lot of those things for me that I do prep, and I hear all these DMs say this time and time again, like, don't over prep for your games. And I say it to people because I see them doing it, and then people are like, oh, I don't want to over prep. But gosh, you got to do some prep, and having that prep there and never using it, to me, I like that. I feel good, because then I feel like, well, I made these encounter lists that I really like, and it helps. And what it really did was help me define the areas. And it's kind of like the map you've made. Your players are never going to see that map.
No.
It is not meant for player consumption. Neither are the tables. It's really there for me, so I can look at it and know what that area is like. No, there's like a society of monsters and creatures there. When you start looking at that next to the flora and fauna, next to the laws, next to what cities are there, next to who's in charge, you've really created a feel. You've really created an ambiance.
So, okay. So I need to make some tables. So we got a creature table or a monster table. What else? What other like other tools would benefit in terms of
name
the
lists.
world building aspects?
Name lists. And people say, oh, aren't you going to use those name lists for campaigning? Nope. I'll use them for every campaign. I got a book of names that I've created where I've looked up and cultivated from, and I think you posted in one of the show links, the name generator tool.
Yes.
Okay.
We'll do it again.
Cool. Because I mentioned it again, sure. The good thing about it is that I can go through, and if I find something that works for this specific area, and like this is what the names are going to be like there, and I know that names don't mean dick to you, but it means something when we're
gonna have that conversation again.
So if you got an area that's totally different people than this other area, make a list of names for men and women that are common there. That way, when you're winging it later and they talk to the barkeep at a bar you didn't expect them to go into, or a fucking goat tender that they didn't expect. Like, oh yeah, and you see in the background a goat tender on the hill. It's just his silhouette. You're just setting a scene. They're like, we want to go talk to that goat tender.
Right.
Oh, where are we? His name is
blah blah blah.
And his name will help define the area. If you just say Pete, it's fine. No one's gonna fault you for that. But if you want Pete to have any impact on your game world, you pull his name from one of these most common names in the area lists that help you determine how to make names, help you determine what kind of consonants they use often, what kind of sounds they use often, if they put like weird emphasis on weird syllables for some reason, whatever that may be when you're doing it. And then you have a different set of names that matches like the city name or the fucking mayor's name or the king's name, and it's the same style and it kind of matches. It's going to help create that feel. That way when you start hearing these specific hard consonants, lots of C's, like Roman names all end with S.
Right.
When you hear Cassus, when you hear Opius, when you hear Spurius, all these names, you know that where they came from. You know, because I use those Roman sounding names for Enoch. And if you're in another part of my world later on and you've been playing in my game world, and then you hear Tiberius is one of the character names, and then he says he's from Enoch, it all makes sense and it feels right. It feels good. It feels like a society. And you can start to picture who he might be there if you understand that society as a character. Or we can just give him a name like Pete, and then I have to sit there and describe it all to you over and over. Like, oh, he's from Enoch. He looks like he's from Enoch, or what have you. But if I just say Spurius,
you have an idea already.
And then I start to describe the way he's dressed a little bit, you might be able to put together whole stories in your head about who this guy is. Just like in real life. Like, you can tell what kind of person somebody is by the way they dress. And that might seem dubious or whatever, but it's not. It's simple. It's just simply equating it back to a culture.
the way your brain works, yeah.
You're relating it back to a culture, making it relatable and understandable. And you're helping define these subcultures in your area by doing so. So that's another
monsters, names. Cool tool. Monsters, names.
I can't think.
Give me one more, Jim.
Okay, one more tool.
I need one more. One more table to make.
Oh, table. I don't know if it's going to be a table.
Oh, okay.
Maybe some random NPCs or
just like some character. What you call them?
That's more. No, see, that's more campaign building. When you start making NPCs, no matter what, that's campaign building. There's no way to make that world building. That's just not how that works. Did we talk about your gods and their relationship?
So we talked about me doing gods, and I still have yet to do it.
Okay. Well, that's going to be another really good tool for you. It's it may have all the impact on the world. May have I was going to say all the impact in the world on your world.
Okay.
So it may have this enormous impact. It may not. You can take one of two approaches to bringing these gods in, and you can either take the approach that as I either hand pick or bring a whole pantheon in, that these certain gods, I'm going to match what area I built and find a god that is already similar to what I've described, and then mold that god that already exists, either from Egyptian mythology, D&D mythology, old school D&D mythology, wherever. Take that god and you say, well, I'm going to change a couple little things about it, or I'm just going to bring it straight in because it makes the most sense with what I've already created. And it's not going to have a huge impact. Or you can be like, you know what, this area is godless, but I want a good god. And then you go through, not sure what you're looking for maybe, and then you find something that may have an enormous impact on your game, and you let it help write the area. So there's two ways to do that, but you're gonna want to have them somehow related to your people. Otherwise,
right.
it'll feel hollow. Because I see that all the time too, where people like say, "Oh yeah, everybody in this city worships this one god," but you don't see the city. You don't see any impact on the city.
You don't see the reflection. Yeah.
Yeah. No relationship. Well, what's their role in the society? Do they act as law keepers? Do they act as spiritual guides for the populace? Or do they also act as a spiritual guide for the king? Do they only act as a spiritual guide for the king? Do people look at this religion in such and such way or such and such way? There's so many ways to view religions. Or I've also seen the opposite to be true, which is maybe even worse. Like, oh, there's a temple of all these gods in all these cities.
Yeah, that wouldn't be true either.
Also not true. There can be lots of gods worshipped in one city. Absolutely. In Rome, many gods were worshipped. That's the Roman way. And that's why the Roman god pantheon is so huge, because they worshipped tons of different gods. Do you have areas like that? Do you have areas that worship one god? What is the impact? What's the relationship?
Thanks for listening to this episode of the D&D 420 podcast. For everything D&D 420 related, check out dnd420.com. If you'd like to reach out to us, you can find us there on the website and on YouTube at D&D 420. Lastly, as always, if you'd like to support the show, you can do that by telling another DM about the show and by visiting us on Apple Podcasts and leaving a rating and review. Thanks for subscribing and being a part of our work here at D&D 420. We will see you next week.